at the recording. All right, good morning. Today is Daf Kuf Daled. We left off of the Mishnah on Kuf Gimel Amabeis, 5 lines in the bottom, and away we go. Naya Mishnah. Hamakabil Sodom Chavero He Beis Hashlachin by Beis Elon. So one who goes ahead and is Makabel, he takes the kablanus, he takes a field from his friend. Happens to be excuse me. Well, so I don't want to define kablanus because we'll soon see in the going. So he has a field from his friend, and it's an irrigated field. Base of shlachin, and there's water in there. Water patches, base of elon, or a tree in there that's used to take the fruit. And yavesh hamaayin, either the stream dries up or nitzas elon, the tree falls. He doesn't take that off from his lease payment. In other words, he has a certain amount he has to pay, and you got to pay whether or not it dries up or the tree fell. However, if he said to him, "Hey, do me a favor, lease me this field, lease me an irrigated field, or lease me a field with a tree in it," and then if the condition was, give me an irrigated field, now it's no longer irrigated, or give me a field with a tree in it, there's no longer a tree in it, then then he's allowed to go ahead and deduct that from his lease payment, because that was the condition. The Gemara says, "Hey, Kidami, I understand. What's drying up here?" So if we're talking about, let's say they're like in Egypt and like the one main source, the Nile River dries up. So why is he not allowed to go ahead and take that off? Right? This is this is a plague on the entire town, and therefore everybody suffers, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and also reduce from the lease payment. So a smaller river canal dried up. You know what? You could have irrigated it by bringing in buckets and going in and watering it that way. And Amar Papa, top line, Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. Amar Papa Hani Tarti Masnisa. So the first two mishnayos of this mishnah, Kamaisa Mishkachasla Ben Chachrunasa Ben Bekablunasa. Right, that can actually, you can go back and explain both cases, whether it's talking about sharecropping or basically a flat lease rate. However, for the mishnayos after this, the Isa Bekablanas, it might either only apply to kablanas. Therefore, it would not apply by leasing, or the Isa but or if it applies by leasing a flat rate, then it wouldn't apply by kablanas, by sharecropping. When it's done based on percentage.
What is this about now? What is this about?
What's this about? So
where are we at?
5 lines on the top on Kuf Daled Amud Aleph.
Yeah. What is
so? That we're talking about when one owns land and someone else is working the land. So whether they make lease payments or they're sharecropper. Lease payments is just a flat fee he pays every year, and the other one is that he takes a certain percentage, a half or a third or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So but if he says, "I want this, a field base of shlachin," then the base of shlachin dries up, then he can go ahead and deduct it. So the Gemara says, maybe he says that when he says, "I want an irrigated field," or that he leases an irrigated field, maybe he was just referring to it by its name, not that this field I need. The reason why I'm leasing is because it's irrigated, but rather it's just the name, right? Milo Tiny, did we not learn somewhere else? It says over there, he wants to spend now. I'm going to sell to you this base core, right? Core is a certain amount. Even if it's not a core, it's less than even half of it. It's a good sale. He said base core, it's not a base core. So shaloi mocher loy ela shema. Right. So now he just called it, right. It's like a 2x4 nowadays, right? 2x4. Right, any contractor say it's not really right. It's not really 2x4. You go ahead and you measure 2x4. It's more like 1.5 by 3 or whatever. Yeah. So Shema. As long as this is referred to as a base core, then even though it's not exactly a base core, that's what it's known for, right? So therefore, it's okay. And same thing over here. He sells them a karma. He might like, I'm gonna go ahead and sell you a vineyard. Funny, there's no vines there. It does work. Shema is only referring to by its name. Buddha Mizakri karma, as long as it's called a kerem, right? Even though it's referred to if this was referred to a kerem, then it'll be okay. Well, he says pardes and I'm gonna sell you an orchard at even though there's no pomegranates or the like. Higio, it is a gevalte sale. Shalom macher loy ella shema. Right, he was only referring to by name. Because as long as it was called a pardes. So Alma, what do you see from this brisa? Right now, even though he defines it as a base core or as a vineyard or as an orchard, even though it doesn't technically qualify as a vineyard, orchard, or has a core, nevertheless, as long as it's known by that, therefore that's why he called it. So in our case, maybe this case, when he said I'm a base of shluchin, he doesn't necessarily have to be self-irrigated, but it has to be, that's what it's referred to. So when is it something that, if it's something the landlord says or the landowner says, I'm going to sell you a base of shlachin, so we see that maybe this is referring to my name, and therefore it's not a guarantee. Therefore, if it dries up, there is no discount. However, in the case of where the a guy says, I want an irrigated field, right? So we see that he's makpid on it being a base of shlachin. Or if he says, I want, he says to the landlord, I want a field with a tree in it. So we see that he's a makpid. If it was just the landowner says to the renter, so then it's like we just said, Shema Ba'alma. However, but if it's the renter who's saying it to the landowner, maybe then he's makpid because that's how he defines it, as a base of shlachin or as a field with a tree. And Ravina, really, even both of them, it could be the landowner says to the person leasing it. However, the kamar is zeh, but Venteli says base of shlachin zeh, michlal de koyga begavo. They're standing on, they're right over, they're on the ground. He says zeh, this one. In other words, they're standing there while making this deal.
Bless you.
Thank you. The koyga begavo skinan base of shlachin lamali. If that's the case. If he's standing there, he can just say this field. Why does he say this base hashlachin? Right? He's saying it because in Pedafka, this field, and it has to be a base hashlachin. As long as it's irrigated, then I'm going to pay you with the agreed upon fees. However, if it's not, right? If it dries up, then there will be a discount. Fine. Next Mishnah, 9 Mishnah. Habakabel sada mechavero v'hayviro. One who goes ahead and is mekabel a field from his friend, the kablonis, and he leaves it empty. He leaves it fallow, right? Habakabel sada mechavero v'hayviro. So Shami
again, we're talking about an urus, right?
This case is right. This case is only an urus, and this would not work by a lease, because if the guy leases land and he doesn't use it, well, that's on you, right? You still got to pay, the lease payments, right? But if he was a sharecropper and I let you work in my field, and all of a sudden it turns every day you're just at the beach, say, well, I could have given to somebody else who would have made me money, and you're not making me money, right? What are you doing? So Shamin Isa Kama Ruya Lasais Ben Isa knows how much the field should have yielded, right? But I say no, and then we give the landowner that Shikak cost of low, because that's what's written there. Because he writes in there when let's say it was me and Eddie writes in there, right? If I go ahead and I don't work the land and I leave it empty,
right,
then I will pay you from the best. In other words, since it's written into the contract, so we take it at face value that Eddie's going to go ahead and pay me if he goes ahead and doesn't work and leaves it empty. And Zok the Gemara Meir Hayadoiresh Lashon Hedya. And Rameir, he would darshan Lashon Hedya, even though it's something that the Chazal, we're soon going to see this a couple of times on today's blot. So even though Chazal weren't masaking this lashon, since people went ahead and put this lashon in their contracts, we stick by these contracts. So Mary, Darish Lashon Hedyot, he would Darish Lashon. The title is learned by so Mary, the Shalom Mateva, right? I'm taking at face value. It says over there, and we see from a Mishnah that if one goes ahead and says, if I will go ahead and I'll pay you for the best, if I don't go ahead and work it, then Itaka doesn't do anything, then they got to go ahead and pay for the best. And Rabbi Yehuda, Darish Lashon Hedyot, Rabbi Yehuda also did what Darish Lashon Hedyot, the time of the Bryce, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. Although maybe Karban Osher Yishto, a man goes ahead and brings there's certain different karbanos, right? In terms of depending on one's financial status, right? Whether it be birds or flour or an animal. So he says, I will bring a korban usher, even though my wife really doesn't have income, right? She's really sort of, her money, her assets are owned by me. Nevertheless, I will bring an usher on her behalf. V'chein kol korban v'korban shehi chayav to any korban that she's obligated. He is responsible. Shekach kasav lo achrayis dis lech alai min kadamas. Dana, right? And that's because he writes in the ksuba, right? And anything, I achrayis, I'll be responsible for anything that's upon you, even from before. So you see over here, since he wrote, I'm taking a chrayas, so therefore, okay, you're taking a chrayas, so you got to bring in the karbanos that she is responsible for. And Hillel Zakan Darish also Lashon Hedyot. Hillel Zakan also is Darish Lashon Hedyot. The time in the Bryce Anshach Sanjah, how you Mekadshinas Hashem. They would go ahead and Mekadesh women, V'shas Kinisasan, and then when you get to the chuppah, with the women that are Mekadesh, the chuppah, Boin Acherim V'chaytfinosam, and other people will go ahead and chop them up and marry them. And from the people on Mamzerim, right? Because they're Mekadesh to one man, and then all of a sudden they ended up going ahead and going to the chuppah with another man. Some of them, Hillel Zakin says, so let me see your mother's ksubas. Low, and they bought the original one that she was Mekadesh to, and some of the iman, it was written there. When you go ahead and enter the chuppah with me, then you'll be mekudeshes to me. In other words, if she was mekudeshes al tanai, you're mekudeshes to me on the condition that you get to the chuppah with me. But if she never got to the chuppah with him because someone else chopped her first, therefore he was never mekadesh to that first man, and therefore she's fully married to the second guy, and therefore Hillel Zakin ruled that these children and he did not make their children mamzer.
This is the proof that the outcome is not the same as you intended.
Well, it was done on a condition. In other words, I'll mekadesh you on the condition that you meet me under the chuppah. And then he was supposed to meet her under the chuppah, and then someone else got to her first. So therefore, it turns out she was never mekudeshes to him in the first place because the condition was never fulfilled. Right.
Fulfilled.
And Rabbi Shua Karcha, Hayadarish Lashon Hedyot, he also is Darish Lashon Hedyot. The time of the rice, within the price of Yehuda ben Karcha, Imer Hamavas Chavero, the one who goes ahead and lends his friend money, Lo Yimshkono Yosim Mechayvo, right? He should not go ahead and take a mashkon more than the obligation. Rashkak Chasev Lai, Teshlamusa, these Chalai, call cable dechi. So he says over here that the amount that you have to go ahead and pay me back, right? That will be equal to the loan. In other words, so he acquires it because equal to loan because he'll use that to go ahead and acquire the object in order to repay the loan, and that's why it should be only up to the same amount as the loan. So the person $100, so then he can go ahead and grab a mashkon and acquire it up until the value of $100. So the Gemara says, "Tam because of haki, because of haki like kind of." But if they didn't write this in, he wouldn't be acquired. If he went ahead and took a mashkon, umes, and then he returned the mashkon. So the guy had the mashkon, you got to go ahead and give it to him back. The guy needs it, the mashkon back, we got to give him the collateral, and then he dies. So now the guy who owed the money died, and he still had the mashkon. He took it back, right, temporarily. So the lender now doesn't have any sort of mashkon. So the lender can go ahead and take the mashkon back from the yorshin. So you see over here that he does acquire it. We don't even need that lashon. The Gemara says, so ahani ksiva legurim. So in other words, he says no, that if you go ahead and you write it, so therefore the writing helps in the case of where it goes down in value. In other words, that the shtar if it's worth less than value, then he can take that off and he can go ahead and gather other things. In other words, let's say it was worth $100, but then it depreciated or it deteriorated to now worth $70. So in addition to acquiring this, which was once 100, he has 70. He can still go ahead and collect $30 more dollars. And Rabbi Yossi Hayadare Shlosh and Hadya Titania, he did. We learned in Bryce, Rabbi Yossi Mir Mokom Shenogu Lasa Ksuva Milva, in a place where they make a ksuva like a loan, right? So basically like a loan document. Therefore, when the husband has to pay the ksuva, right, or pay her back, right? It's a loan. Go to the milva, right? And therefore, you can go ahead and collect it like the lacha, like other loans. And also in the case of lichpol, go to machta. In a place they used to often go ahead and overstate the ksuva of the woman. So whatever they would write in there, they would actually double it. So therefore, whatever was written in there, they would go ahead and go to machta and collect half, because that was the actual amount of loan. So if it was written in there 400, it meant they can go ahead and collect 200. And the Harbali Gavo Tilsa, they would collect a third, because I guess they would overestimate it 3 times. So
if they make a contract that's going to pay him 400, how does he get away with just paying him 200?
Oh, so no, over here we're talking about the ksuba of the woman. The ksuba says their ksuba. If it's written to the ksuba, they used to overstate it. They would overstate it, and that's what he's saying here. So, and therefore, if the custom was to lichpol, to double it, so therefore you can only go ahead and collect half of it. All right, so let's see. So Meremar Magbi Nami Shivcha, right? He will go ahead and collect the entire amount. If it was written in there 400, you collect 400. So I'm related. I only collect half. If you go ahead and make a kinyan on the ksuba, and therefore, if there was no kinyan on it to acquire it, the assets, and then in order to go ahead and pay back, it was never taken. So therefore, it was never taken. So therefore, you give half on. But if it was taken, they made a kinyan on it, then you go ahead and you pay the full amount. And Ravina B'Shech the Kasi Labarte. So Ravina went ahead. He overestimated. He doubled it, and he wrote this dowry for his daughter. So Amrlei Niknamine. So the Chassan's family says, okay, let's go ahead and acquire the Niknamine Nemar. So Amrlei said to them, if you guys go ahead and acquire it, therefore you're acquiring the face value. Therefore, I'm not going to go ahead and double what I write in there. And and if I'm going to double it, then I'm not going to allow you to go ahead and make a kinyan. Because if you do go ahead and you make a kinyan, if you acquire it, then you have to pay what's written in there. Therefore, I'm not going to go ahead and double it, the exaggerated amount. I'm just going to go ahead and do, the actual amount. And how gava damalu havili arba meya zuze lebarti biksubasa. There's a person who said, go ahead and give 400 zuz for my daughter for her ksuba. Now. Shalach Ravacha Bered the Rav Avia the coming to Rav Ashi said for Rav Ashi so Arba Meya. So he said to him, in this case, so he said in this case the coming to Rav Ashi. So Arba Meya Dinun Timni Meya. Oh, Arba Meya Zuze Dinun Masan. Does he mean when he said 400, give 400 to my daughter? Does he mean that's 400 and therefore he should write in 800? Or did he mean write 400 and therefore the actual amount is 200? So Ravashi Chaisina, we see I Amar Havula Arba Mea, give her 400 Zuze Dina Timna Mea means that you should write 800. I Amar Kisbula Arba Mea, if he said write for her 400 Zuze, then Dinan Masan, then you should go ahead and it's only worth you write 400, but it's only worth 200. Ikadami so have a different version of Ravashi Chaisina, we see I Amar Liksuva Arba Mea Zuze Dinan Timna Mea. If he says for the ksuba, then it means 400 is the value, and therefore you write it 800. V'yamar big ksuvasa, put 400 in her ksuva. It means arba zuzeh to inan masan. It means 400 to be written down, and only 200 to be the actual value. However, big ksuva doesn't matter what difference we says. Give it to her for her ksuva or in her ksuva. It's arba mea zuzeh to inan masan. It's always that would be 400 for 2 adamar until he says havu la stama. Until he, when would be 800, if he says give her. If he doesn't mention the ksuba, then it means give her 400. If he mentions the ksuba, then he's referring to what's being written in there. And how got the couple right? So the person who received land from his friends, Amar. So he said to him, if I go ahead and leave it empty, then I'll give you 1,000 zuz. So what did this guy do? Right? So he says, so he actually left a third of it empty. So a third of it was empty, and the other 2/3. So he said, if I leave the entire field empty, I'm going to give you 1,000 zuz. But he left a third of it. So what's halacha there? So I'm in the hard deal. He said, okay, you know what? He left a third of it empty. Therefore, I give him 333 and a third zuz. And Rav Omar, no, when he says, if I leave it empty, I'll give you $1,000, right? He was exaggerating. It wasn't a smachti. He didn't really think he was going to leave it empty. Basically, he was just reassuring the landowner that he was going to go ahead and work the field. So therefore, he was just an exaggeration. Therefore, he owes him nothing. But according to Rava, what's the difference between our Mishnah? The Tanakh, our Mishnah says, our Mishnah says, if he says a condition, if I don't work, right? If I leave it empty and I don't work, then I'll pay you I'll pay from the best. Our Mishnah says that works. So why is that different in this case when you're saying it's in the smach, it's an exaggeration? So my answer is no. Over there, he just says, I'll pay you the best. He wasn't exaggerating. However, Hach in the case, if he says, if I leave it empty, I'm going to go ahead and give you 1,000 zuz. So therefore, since he said an exaggerated figure, therefore, we'll say that he was exaggerating the entire time.
Halachic issue, you exaggerate. That's puts you in so many different potential.
Well, the smach, right? I mean, that's the whole thing with the smach. There's, do you go ahead and we have a lot of times by nadarim, right, or something like that. If you say something that's realistic or not realistic, did he mean it or did he not? So, words do mean something, right? In other words, so in this case, if he shows that he makes an exaggerated line, right? So how Gavra the Kabul out of the Shmishmei. So the person he had. Okay, Kablanas, I'm going to go ahead and work our field with sesame, which is hard in the field, and Zarichiti. But instead, he went ahead and did wheat, which is actually better for the field. And Abdachiti Keshubshri. And then he was able to go ahead, even though wheat is not as profitable, but the guy who was working the field was as profitable as it would have been with the sesame, but it was less stress on the ground, right? So which really benefited the landowner, right? So, you know what we should do? Because the landowner agreed to sesame, right? And he got the benefit of, therefore he got the benefit of the field being worked only like wheat, but he got paid the financial benefit. So therefore, let's go ahead and pay him, let's take off because he saved on the amount his land would have depreciated. So let's go ahead and give extra to the guy who worked the land with the wheat because he works extra hard in order to to preserve the land. However, I'm no. So he says, no, you know what? Go ahead and destroy my field. I don't care, but give me my money. So therefore, in this case, he wanted his money, even if it was at the expense of his field. He didn't care. He wanted the cash. So therefore, we're not going to take away from his cash. Say, because your field didn't deteriorate as much as it should have. And how Gavra, similar case to Kabul Ari the Shumshri, he was going to go ahead and do Kablamas for Shumshri from sesame, which would destroy the field, but very profitable. And Zarachiti, he planted wheat. So the Kablan, the sharecropper planted wheat, right? And of the Chiti, which was actually beneficial for the land, and also the Chiti Tfein and Shushan was actually more profitable than even sesame. So you know what? Just give the guy, the landowner, what would have been the profit had it been sesame, and the extra amount of the wheat that he worked so hard to even the benefit beyond that should go all to the sharecropper. So only he was the one who made the profit, and the land itself didn't the profit. So land made the profit also. So therefore, divide everything evenly.
What about the deterioration of the property?
So in other words, he saved on it because once again he says, I don't care. Well, the story before one says you pay for, hey, I saved your land, so therefore I'm going to take a little extra for saving your land. And the other guy said, I didn't save my land, not saving my land. I needed the cash this year, right? Yeah, so I need to go ahead and right. So I'm going to hide the high Eastam. So now we're going to get a little bit into, we're not really going to delve into it, but this is where we saw an iska. An iska is an investment. An investment is a business deal. All right. Basically, one guy puts in the capital, the other guy puts in the sweat equity. And we say, hi, iska, palga, milva, palga, pigadon. They're both at risk. Therefore, if the guy gives, let's say, $1,000, so we treat for the investment for the business, right? They're opening a business, so one guy's going to work, the other guy's priced $1,000, so it's not a loan, because if it's a guaranteed loan, then he gets profits on top of that. So then the entire thing is guaranteed. So therefore, he's working as interest for the loan. And if we say the entire thing is if it was all together, so is all that risk. So then he would get for the free loan, he would get that amount. So what do we say? We say half is a loan and half is a collateral, right? It's collateral to do the business with, and therefore he's also so both of them at risk. So we say palga milva, so therefore 500 is a loan. So let's say the business goes zero, you got to pay him back $500. So we say palga milva or palga pikad. But the other one is pikadon is collateral, and therefore he gets back his money on that. And in addition, so they pay the profits. So Avrabana Milsa so they did something that was beneficial to both, because therefore neither one carry the full risk. So in Hashtam and Palga Milva. So now we say that happens in Milva. If he wants to go ahead and take that $500 and go ahead or take and buy beer and go ahead and drink away, he can go ahead and drink away, because something is a loan. He can go ahead and do whatever he wants with it. If it was money for the business, so that's for the business. But if it's a loan, so then okay, I have to pay you back, but I'm going to use that $500, the loan part, then I'm going to go ahead and go to the bar. However, Rav Amar, no, lahachi karda iska, that's what I call iska. No, I gave it to you to be misasek, right, to be isek with it, to work with it, and therefore it wasn't a loan, a free loan. It was a loan that to do work with, and therefore he can prevent him from going ahead and spending it at the local pub. And and if the guy dies, so it's like move objects to the sons, and therefore it can't be collected. However, Rav Amar, no, that's why it's called a mace. The mace lo yasim it's not considered to be movable objects when it comes to the sons, i.e., that the sons knows because you can't go ahead and take metalslin. Rather, it's not treated like that, and therefore that the guy who invested the money, right, with his partner, the sweat equity guy died, so his children don't get the money. That's because it's not like metalslin. And Amarava chada iska v'trei shtar psida the malva. If you go ahead and you do two different iskas, just to make a long story short, but in this case, because remember that when the guy doing the work, he gets a little more of the profits, and the other guy, right, he gets the loan payment back. So therefore, if someone so if it was really one iska, but they wrote it up as two different documents, so each one, if they don't perform the same, one performs better than the other. In other words, one might have a loss, which is paid zero, but the other one has a gain, which the sweat equity guy gets paid a little more, because in other words, he has to get paid more in order that the money doesn't come back as interest. So therefore, now since this guy gets paid, this guy also gets extra. So therefore, that is a loss to the malva, because each guy, he could potentially make more. However, Trey but if there's two different iskas and the chad shtar and put them on shtar, then they would net out in terms of both of them were profitable, one was a loss, and therefore, even though that would be a psida the lova, that would be a loss to the borrower. And real quickly, let's get to the Mishnah. A person who has a iska from his friend, right? This business who pasid, and it was lost. And then he went ahead and he worked hard, and then he didn't go ahead and basically didn't tell the guy about the loss, and he worked hard and got the money back. So right? In other words, yes, there was a loss in the beginning. I came back, but you should really also take a hit with me in the first loss. It wasn't that you worked on your own, and therefore you should go ahead. I should join you with the losses. The reason why you worked is not for my benefit that I have to partake in losses. You did it for yourself, that people will know that to invest with you in the future, that you are a successful businessman. The Amar Rava Hani Beit trade of the Iska Bahadi Adan. Two people were doing work together, and they made money. The Amar Lechalachavri Tolefli. Let's go ahead and split it up. The Amar Leidach Navich Tfei. Let's go ahead and leave the money in. Dinahu Dmiakiv. In other words, he can go ahead and force him to keep money in. In other words, that not to go ahead and take the money out, rather leave the money in and do more business with it, and to go ahead and create more profits. And so okay, give me half the profits. So the other one can say to him, Rav No. The profits are really now part of they're part of the karen, they're part of the principle, and therefore they're backing them up. Okay, so give me half the profits and half the principal. Iska lahada meshubat. Right? In other words, the Iska, they're mortgaged to one another. V'yamarle niflug ravcha v'niflug karna. Let's go ahead and divide the profits and divide the principal. V'matzul seda. And if you have a loss, right? In other words, I'll join you with the loss. And he says, no, you can't go ahead and take your money out. If there's a loss later on, you'll help cover the losses. Why? Because he says, I don't want to go ahead and work on your own and you help cover it. Rather, I'd rather you be in there because the mazel of the two of us together has been matzliach, and therefore it will continue not for you just to cover the losses. All right, we'll stop over here at the Mishnah. Shkoyach. Have a good yantif. So